You don't belong here anymore. Those were the first words my mother-in-law said to me less than 5 feet away from my wife's coffin. The entire chapel went silent after that. Even the piano player stopped moving his hands. Rain hammered against the stained glass windows while I stood there in a black suit that still smelled like hospital disinfectant, staring at Evelyn Sterling as if I'd misunderstood her. But I hadn't. Her pale blue eyes were cold, steady, almost relieved. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice just enough to make it worse. Stop pretending to cry, Adrian. Victoria is gone, and your little fairy tale is over. I felt every person in that room watching me. Her cousins. Her business partners. Old family friends from North Shore country clubs who had never once bothered to remember my last name. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked satisfied. One man near the back actually smirked while sipping coffee beside the memorial photos of my wife. My wife. Victoria Cole. 34 years old. Dead after a car accident nobody could explain properly. 3 days earlier, I had still been holding her hand in a private hospital room downtown while machines beeped around us. 3 days earlier, she had whispered, if something happens to me, promise me you won't trust my mother. At the time, I thought the medication was making her emotional. I thought there would still be time to ask questions later. But later never came. Evelyn suddenly grabbed my wrist and pulled my hand away from the coffin. You've embarrassed this family long enough, she snapped. A few gasps spread through the chapel. I looked down at Victoria one last time. Her favorite white roses surrounded the polished mahogany coffin, and for one insane second I expected her to sit up and laugh at this nightmare. Instead, all I could see was the reflection of the chandelier shaking slightly above us. I loved your daughter, I said quietly. Evelyn's expression hardened instantly. No, she whispered. You loved what she gave you. The accusation hit harder because I knew everyone else believed it too. To them, I was the outsider who married into money. The nobody from Ohio who somehow ended up with a beautiful woman from one of Chicago's wealthiest families. They never saw the nights Victoria and I spent eating takeout on our apartment floor before her father's company exploded into a billion-dollar empire. They never saw her crying in my arms after board meetings with people who treated her like a machine instead of a human being. They only saw the tailored suits, the penthouse, the charity galas, the expensive vacations. They saw the ending, not the beginning. Evelyn straightened her pearl necklace and looked toward the chapel doors. 2 security guards immediately started walking down the aisle toward me. At first I thought they were there for crowd control. Then one of them leaned close and said softly, Mr. Cole, we're gonna need you to leave after the service. I stared at him in disbelief. You're removing me from my own wife's funeral. The guard avoided eye contact. That told me everything. Evelyn had planned this before I even arrived. I looked around the room again, desperate for someone to say something, anything, but nobody moved. Not Victoria's brother. Not her aunt. Not the family attorney sitting in the front row pretending to check his phone. Silence filled the chapel like smoke. Then Evelyn delivered the sentence that shattered whatever was left inside me. Your bags are already packed, she said calmly. They'll be waiting outside the house. You are not spending another night under my roof. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? The locks were changed this morning. She smiled without warmth. You didn't actually think that house belonged to you, did you? And that was the exact moment I realized something was deeply wrong, because Victoria had told me 2 weeks earlier, with absolute certainty, no matter what happens, that house is yours now. For the next 20 minutes, I sat through the rest of the funeral feeling like a stranger at my own life. People stood one by one to praise Victoria while I barely heard a single word. My mind stayed trapped on that sentence. The locks were changed this morning. Every memory inside that house suddenly flashed through my head at once. The framed wedding photo in the upstairs hallway. Victoria's coffee mug beside the kitchen sink. The blue sweater she always stole from me when Chicago winters got brutal. All of it gone before her body was even buried. When the service finally ended, people rushed toward the exits as if escaping a storm. Nobody stopped to speak to me except Victoria's younger cousin, Emily, who nervously touched my arm near the chapel doors. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Your mother-in-law has been making calls since last night." "What calls?" I asked. Emily glanced over her shoulder toward Evelyn before lowering her voice even more. "To lawyers. To the board. To security. Something is happening, Adrian." Before I could ask another question, Evelyn appeared beside us like she had been listening the entire time. "Emily," she said sharply, "your father is looking for you." Emily immediately stepped away without another word. Evelyn watched her disappear into the crowd before turning back toward me with that same icy expression. "You should leave before you embarrass yourself further." I looked at her in disbelief. "Your daughter died 3 days ago. And yet somehow you are still thinking about yourself," she replied. Rain poured outside as guests opened umbrellas and hurried toward black SUVs lining the curb. I noticed several board members from Sterling Biotech avoiding eye contact with me as they walked past. A few months ago those same men shook my hand at charity galas and toasted expensive whiskey with me in rooftop lounges overlooking Lake Michigan. Now they acted like I carried some contagious disease. One of the security guards approached again holding my car keys and a folded piece of paper. "Your personal belongings were removed from the residence this afternoon," he said awkwardly. "The address listed here is where they were sent." I unfolded the paper and felt my chest tighten. It was not a storage facility. It was a budget motel nearly 40 miles outside the city near Interstate 88. Evelyn had not only thrown me out. She wanted me humiliated. Publicly. Deliberately. I looked up at her one last time. Victoria would hate this. For the first time all day, something flickered across Evelyn's face. Not guilt. Fear. It lasted maybe 1 second before disappearing completely. "You clearly did not know my daughter as well as you thought," she said coldly. Then she walked away toward a waiting black Escalade while reporters near the sidewalk began taking photographs. I stood there alone under the church awning until nearly everyone left. The rain smelled like wet concrete and gasoline drifting in from the street. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I answered immediately, hoping for answers, but all I heard was silence for several seconds before a man finally spoke. "Mr. Cole?" "Yes. This is Arthur Bennett from Bennett and Rowe Legal Services. I represented your wife privately." My heart skipped. "Privately? Your wife instructed me to contact you only under specific circumstances." I stepped farther away from the church entrance as thunder rolled overhead. "What circumstances?" Another pause. Then the lawyer said something that instantly turned my blood cold. Mrs. Cole believed her life might be in danger before the accident occurred. I nearly dropped the phone. "What are you talking about?" "Not over the phone," he replied quickly. "Listen carefully. Do not return to the Sterling residence under any circumstances tonight. And if anyone asks, you never spoke to me." "Wait," I said desperately. What did Victoria know? But the call suddenly disconnected. I stared down at my phone while rainwater dripped from my sleeves. Then, across the parking lot, I noticed someone standing beside my car. A little girl wearing a dark green funeral dress. She was holding a sealed white envelope with Victoria's handwriting written across the front. The little girl could not have been older than 10. Rain soaked the sleeves of her dark green dress while she stood beside my car clutching the envelope against her chest like it mattered more than the storm around us. For a second I honestly thought I was imagining her. My entire body felt numb from exhaustion, grief, and whatever twisted nightmare the last hour had become. Then she walked closer and held the envelope out toward me with both hands. Mrs. Cole told me to wait until everybody left, she said softly. My throat tightened the moment I saw Victoria's handwriting across the front. Adrian. Only for you. The sight of those words nearly broke me. Victoria always curved the tail of the letter Y when she wrote quickly. I would have recognized it anywhere. Who gave this to you? I asked carefully. The little girl glanced nervously toward the parking lot where the last black SUVs were pulling away from the church. Mrs. Cole came to the funeral home 2 weeks ago, she whispered. She said if something bad happened, I had to make sure her husband got this without her mother seeing. A cold sensation ran down my spine. 2 weeks ago. Victoria had planned this before the accident ever happened. I looked back down at the envelope. My hands were shaking now. What is your name? Sophie. Sophie, did Victoria say anything else? The little girl hesitated. Then she nodded once. She said people were lying to you. Thunder rolled across the sky as a sharp gust of wind swept through the nearly empty parking lot. Before I could ask another question, a woman from the funeral staff called Sophie from the church entrance. The girl stepped backward immediately. I have to go. Wait. She paused. Was Victoria scared? Sophie looked at me with a sadness no child her age should have carried. She cried when she dropped off the envelope, she said quietly. She kept saying she ran out of time. Then she turned and ran back toward the chapel doors, disappearing inside before I could stop her. I stood there frozen in the rain staring at the envelope for nearly a full minute before finally climbing into my car. The leather seat still smelled faintly like Victoria's vanilla perfume. That almost destroyed me more than anything else. Her sunglasses were still sitting in the center console exactly where she left them after brunch the Sunday before the accident. I picked them up slowly, remembering how she laughed when I teased her for buying designer frames that cost more than my first apartment rent. It hit me then that this car might be the only place left where traces of her still existed. Everything else had already been taken away. I finally opened the envelope carefully, terrified that the rain would ruin whatever was inside. There was no letter. No explanation. Just a silver storage unit key attached to a tag with a handwritten address in downtown Chicago and one sentence written underneath it in black ink. Do not trust the accident report. My pulse instantly started pounding in my ears. I read the sentence again and again hoping I misunderstood it. But the meaning stayed the same every single time. Victoria believed her death was not an accident. Suddenly my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I answered immediately. Adrian, a female voice whispered urgently. I recognized it at once. Emily. Victoria's cousin. She sounded terrified. You need to leave right now, she said. Your mother-in-law just told someone to follow you. My grip tightened around the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned pale. What do you mean she told someone to follow me? I asked. Emily lowered her voice immediately. I could hear people talking somewhere behind her, glasses clinking, car doors shutting, the distant sound of rain hitting pavement. I was standing near the front entrance when Aunt Evelyn called somebody after the funeral, she whispered. She said, make sure he does not go anywhere unexpected tonight. A sick feeling settled deep in my stomach. Who was she talking to? I do not know. But Adrian, she sounded scared. That word stopped me cold. Scared. Evelyn Sterling had spent the entire funeral acting powerful, cold, completely in control. Fear did not fit. Emily, listen to me carefully, I said. Did Victoria ever tell you anything before she died? Silence filled the line for a moment. Then Emily answered carefully. About 3 weeks ago, Victoria asked me something strange. Rain continued hammering the roof of my car while headlights passed slowly outside the church gates. What did she ask? She wanted to know if I still had copies of old family event videos stored online. My eyebrows pulled together instantly. Videos? She said she was looking for proof of something. Emily sounded nervous now, like she regretted calling me at all. I thought it was related to company drama or another fight with your mother-in-law. But after the accident, her voice trailed off. Emily, I pressed, what are you not telling me? Another long pause. Then she whispered something that made my chest tighten instantly. Victoria thought somebody inside the family was stealing money from Sterling Biotech. I stared through the rain-covered windshield, trying to process the sentence. Sterling Biotech was not just some family business. It was one of the largest medical technology companies in Illinois. Billion-dollar government contracts. Research partnerships. International investors. If there was financial corruption inside the company, the consequences could destroy the entire family. Did she tell you who? No, Emily said quickly. But she stopped trusting almost everyone around her. Suddenly headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. A black SUV slowly turned into the nearly empty parking lot and stopped 3 spaces behind my car. My heartbeat instantly accelerated. Tinted windows. Engine still running. Emily kept talking, but my attention locked onto the vehicle behind me. Adrian? Are you there? Yes, I answered quietly while watching the SUV. I think somebody just arrived. Leave now, Emily said immediately. Do not go to the motel. If Aunt Evelyn thinks you have something from Victoria, she will try to get it back. I looked down at the storage key still sitting in my palm. Emily, why are you helping me? Her answer came softer this time. Sadder. Because Victoria trusted you more than anyone. And because the night before she died, she called me crying. My throat tightened again. What did she say? She said if anything happened to her, the truth would eventually come for all of them. Before I could respond, the black SUV behind me flashed its headlights twice. Slow. Intentional. My pulse started pounding in my ears. Emily, I have to go. Adrian, she said quickly, whatever Victoria left you, do not let Evelyn find it. The call disconnected. I immediately started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, trying not to look suspicious, but the second I turned onto the main road, the SUV followed me. Same speed. Same lane. Every turn I made, it made too. Rain blurred the city lights around me while anxiety crawled up my spine inch by inch. Then my phone lit up one more time with a text message from an unknown number. It contained only one sentence. Victoria knew too much. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stared at the message glowing on my phone screen. Victoria knew too much. No name. No explanation. Just those 4 words sitting there like a warning from somebody who already knew where I was going next. I looked up immediately at the black SUV behind me. It stayed exactly 3 car lengths back as I moved through the wet Chicago streets. Every traffic light reflected across the windshield in blurred streaks of red and yellow while rain pounded hard enough to shake the roof of my car. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Panic would only make me careless. Victoria used to say that people revealed their real intentions when they thought you were cornered. Right now I finally understood what she meant. I made a sudden right turn onto a narrow side street lined with closed restaurants and dark storefronts. The SUV turned with me. Another turn. Same result. There was no doubt anymore. Somebody was following me intentionally. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel while memories from the last month started replaying inside my head differently. Victoria waking up at 3 in the morning to check security cameras from her phone. Victoria suddenly insisting we stop sharing our location data. Victoria freezing during dinner one night after seeing a text message from her mother. At the time I thought grief from her father's death years earlier had simply made the Sterling family paranoid and controlling. But now every strange moment felt connected to something bigger hiding underneath the surface. Another flash of lightning lit up the road ahead as I spotted a crowded gas station near an interstate entrance ramp. Without thinking, I pulled sharply into it. Several cars sat parked beneath bright fluorescent lights while truck drivers moved in and out of the convenience store carrying coffee cups and snacks. The SUV slowed near the entrance. For a second I thought it would follow me inside. Instead it kept driving past the station without stopping. I watched carefully until its taillights disappeared into the rain. Only then did I realize my hands were trembling. I parked near the side of the building and immediately locked the doors. The storage key sat in my center console beside Victoria's sunglasses. I picked it up again and stared at the handwritten address attached to the tag. North Clark Street. Downtown Chicago. Storage Facility 214. Whatever Victoria hid there had terrified her enough to plan ahead before she died. My phone suddenly buzzed again, nearly making me jump. This time it was not an unknown number. It was a calendar reminder from Victoria's shared account. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. meeting with Arthur Bennett. My pulse quickened instantly. Arthur Bennett. The lawyer who called me after the funeral. Victoria had scheduled a meeting with him the day after her death. Not before. After. That meant she expected something to happen. I quickly opened our old message history searching for anything connected to Bennett, but most of the recent conversations were gone. Deleted. Victoria never deleted messages. Ever. The realization sent another wave of dread through me. Then I noticed something else. One unread draft email still saved inside her account. No recipient. No subject line. Only one unfinished sentence written hours before the accident. If anything happens to me, Adrian must never find out about. The sentence ended there abruptly. My stomach dropped. Find out about what? I reread it 3 times hoping more text would appear somehow, but the draft stayed incomplete. Outside, thunder shook the sky again while headlights rolled across the gas station parking lot. A silver sedan had just pulled in beside my car. The driver stepped out wearing a dark coat and baseball cap pulled low over his face. At first I ignored him. Then he stopped walking and looked directly at me through the rain-covered window. Slowly, deliberately, he raised one hand and pointed toward the storage key sitting beside me before mouthing 5 chilling words. She never wanted you there. The man stood motionless beside the silver sedan while rain rolled off the brim of his baseball cap. She never wanted you there. The words replayed in my head instantly, sharp and deliberate, like he had practiced them beforehand. My pulse pounded harder as I stared through the windshield trying to understand who he was and how he knew about the storage key. I had barely removed it from the envelope 10 minutes earlier. Nobody should have known it existed except Victoria. Slowly, the man glanced toward the convenience store entrance, then back at me again. You should leave Chicago tonight, he mouthed before turning away calmly. I unlocked my door instinctively and stepped out into the cold rain. Hey! I shouted. The man did not run. He simply climbed into the silver sedan and pulled away from the gas station without urgency, disappearing into traffic seconds later. I stood there soaked and breathing heavily while trucks rumbled past the interstate exit nearby. Something about the encounter felt wrong. If he wanted to threaten me, why warn me instead? And how did he know about the key? I climbed back into my car and locked the doors again immediately. My thoughts were spinning too fast now. Victoria believed her accident was suspicious. Her mother wanted me removed from the family immediately. Somebody followed me from the funeral. A stranger knew about the storage key. And now there was an unfinished message suggesting Victoria had hidden something from me entirely. I rubbed my hands over my face trying to steady myself. Then another memory suddenly surfaced from 2 nights before Victoria died. We had been sitting in the kitchen after midnight while snow fell outside the penthouse windows. Victoria barely touched her tea that night. She just stared at the city lights silently until I finally asked what was wrong. Do you ever wonder how well you really know someone? She asked me out of nowhere. I laughed softly at the time and told her she was exhausted from work stress. But she kept staring out the window. People can live beside you for years and still hide entire parts of themselves, she whispered. I remember joking that she sounded like somebody in a crime documentary. Instead of laughing, she looked at me with an expression I could never fully explain afterward. Sadness mixed with guilt. If I told you everything, she said quietly, you might never forgive me. At the time I thought she meant family drama with Evelyn. Now I was no longer sure. My phone buzzed again, pulling me back into the present. This time it was Arthur Bennett. I answered instantly. Where are you? He asked without greeting me. A gas station near Interstate 90. Good. Stay in public places tonight. His voice sounded tense now, rushed. Mr. Cole, listen carefully. Did Victoria leave you anything? I hesitated for half a second too long. Why? Because if she did, other people are already looking for it. I glanced automatically toward the rain-covered parking lot outside. What exactly was Victoria involved in? Another pause filled the line before Bennett answered carefully. Your wife discovered financial transfers connected to offshore accounts tied to Sterling Biotech. My stomach tightened instantly. Illegal transfers? Potentially. Bennett lowered his voice further. Victoria believed someone inside the company was preparing to disappear with hundreds of millions of dollars. Thunder cracked loudly overhead while my mind struggled to process the number. Hundreds of millions. Who? I asked immediately. That is the problem, Bennett replied. Victoria never got the chance to tell me the name. I swallowed hard. Then what is inside the storage unit? Silence. Then Bennett said something that made my blood run cold all over again. According to your wife, enough evidence to destroy the Sterling family forever. For several seconds, I could not speak. Rain hammered against the windshield while Bennett's words echoed inside my head over and over again. Enough evidence to destroy the Sterling family forever. I looked down at the storage key resting in my palm and suddenly understood why Victoria had been terrified during those final weeks. Whatever she discovered was not just company corruption anymore. It was something big enough to make powerful people panic. Mr. Cole. Bennett said sharply through the phone. Are you still there? Yes, I answered quietly. Why would Victoria leave this to me? Bennett exhaled. Slowly. Because she trusted you. I almost laughed at how impossible that sounded after everything that had happened today. Then why did she keep all of this secret from me? Another pause followed. Your wife believed the fewer people who knew the truth, the safer you would be. I stared out at the parking lot lights reflecting across the wet pavement. Safe. That word felt meaningless now. Somebody followed me from the funeral. A stranger knew about the storage key. And Evelyn Sterling had thrown me out before Victoria was even buried. There is something else, Bennett said carefully. Victoria changed several legal documents 48 hours before the accident. My heartbeat quickened immediately. What kind of documents? Ownership transfers. Emergency authorization forms. Private trust revisions. My grip tightened around the phone. Transferred to who? Silence filled the line long enough to make my stomach twist. You, Bennett finally answered. Thunder rolled overhead again while I sat frozen in disbelief. That does not make sense. Victoria anticipated resistance from her family if anything happened to her. Bennett sounded exhausted now, like he had not slept in days. She believed you would need leverage. Leverage. The word made everything suddenly feel colder. Less like grief. More like strategy. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes briefly, remembering the last full conversation Victoria and I had before the accident. We were sitting on the balcony outside our penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The wind was freezing, but she refused to go inside. She just wrapped herself in my coat and stared at the skyline quietly. If people showed you who they really were, she asked suddenly, would you still love them? I smiled at her back then and said something stupid about marriage vows. But Victoria never smiled back. Instead she whispered, I wish things were simpler. At the time I thought she meant stress from the company. Now I realized she had probably been carrying secrets that entire night. Bennett's voice pulled me back again. Mr. Cole, you need to access that storage unit before anyone else does. What exactly am I looking for? Financial records. Digital backups. Possibly video evidence. He hesitated again before adding, Victoria also mentioned a file labeled Blackwater. The name meant nothing to me. What is Blackwater? I do not know, Bennett admitted. But she said it was the reason she stopped trusting her mother completely. My chest tightened immediately. You think Evelyn is involved? I think your wife feared someone very close to her. Outside the gas station, a police cruiser slowly drove past the parking lot entrance without stopping. The flashing reflections briefly lit up the inside of my car in blue and red streaks. Suddenly another memory hit me hard enough to make my stomach drop. 3 nights before the accident, I woke up around 2 in the morning and found Victoria sitting alone in our home office. She slammed her laptop shut the second she saw me standing there. At the time she smiled nervously and claimed she was reviewing quarterly reports. But I remembered something now that I had ignored before. She had been crying. And on the desk beside her laptop sat a single yellow folder with one word printed across the front in black capital letters. Blackwater. The memory of that yellow folder would not leave my mind. Blackwater. I could still picture it sitting beside Victoria's laptop under the dim office light while snow drifted past the windows behind her. At the time I ignored it because I trusted her completely. That was what marriage was supposed to be. Trust. But now every hidden glance, every late-night phone call, every moment of silence between us felt loaded with meaning I had missed. Mr. Cole, Bennett said carefully through the phone, you cannot stay in one place much longer. I checked the clock on the dashboard. Nearly midnight. My entire life had collapsed in less than 12 hours. Where should I go? Directly to the storage unit, Bennett answered immediately. If Victoria hid evidence there, you need to secure it before somebody else does. I looked out at the rain-soaked interstate entrance beyond the gas station parking lot. Downtown Chicago was at least 40 minutes away in this weather. And if somebody is waiting for me there? Bennett hesitated. Then Victoria underestimated how quickly her family would move. The line went quiet after that. Neither of us wanted to say what we were both thinking. If the Sterling family truly believed Victoria left evidence behind, they would never allow it to surface publicly. There is one more thing you should know, Bennett added suddenly. Your wife requested a sealed secondary will. My chest tightened instantly. A second will? It cannot legally be opened unless very specific conditions are met. What conditions? Another pause. If her death was ruled suspicious. I stared at the rain streaking down the windshield while a cold wave moved through my entire body. Victoria had prepared for this. Not emotionally. Legally. Strategically. She had expected something bad enough to create backup wills and hidden evidence before she died. Why did nobody mention this after the accident? I asked. Because the official report labeled it accidental immediately. Bennett's voice dropped lower now. Too quickly, in my opinion. A semi-truck roared past the gas station entrance, shaking the windows of my car slightly. I suddenly remembered another detail from the night of the accident that had seemed insignificant at the time. When I arrived at the hospital, Evelyn was already there before the ambulance records even showed Victoria had been admitted. I remembered asking how she got there so fast, but she ignored the question entirely. Back then I assumed hospital staff contacted her quickly because of the family's influence. Now I was no longer sure. "Mr. Cole," Bennett said again, "did Victoria ever mention a man named Richard Hale?" The name hit me immediately. He sits on the Sterling Biotech board. Victoria met with him privately 2 days before the accident. My grip tightened around the steering wheel. About what? She did not tell me. But afterward she became extremely frightened. Thunder cracked loudly overhead again. "Frightened of Hale?" "No," Bennett replied quietly. "Frightened of what he knew." The call ended seconds later after Bennett warned me to stop using my main credit cards and avoid returning anywhere connected to the Sterling family. I sat alone in silence for a long moment afterward, trying to process everything. Then my eyes drifted back to Victoria's unfinished draft email still glowing on my phone screen. "If anything happens to me, Adrian must never find out about." Suddenly another memory surfaced so clearly it made my stomach twist. 1 week before the accident, Victoria had asked me a strange question while we were driving home from dinner. "If you discovered our entire relationship started because of a lie," she asked softly, "would you still want the truth?" At the time I laughed and told her she was overthinking things again. But she did not laugh with me. She just stared silently out the passenger window while downtown Chicago lights reflected in her eyes. And for the first time since her death, I began wondering if the biggest secret Victoria kept was not about her family at all. Maybe it was about me. I drove into downtown Chicago just after midnight with rain still falling hard enough to blur the skyline into streaks of white and gold. Every mile toward the storage facility felt heavier than the last because for the first time since Victoria died, I understood something terrifying. My wife had not simply been hiding secrets from her family. She had been hiding secrets from me too. The storage facility sat on North Clark Street between an old warehouse and a closed diner with flickering neon lights. The building looked ordinary, almost forgettable, which somehow made it more unsettling. I parked across the street and stayed inside the car for nearly a full minute scanning the area carefully. No black SUVs. No unfamiliar faces. Just rainwater sliding across empty sidewalks under dim streetlights. I finally stepped out holding the silver key so tightly it dug into my palm. Inside, the facility lobby smelled like dust and industrial cleaner. A tired security guard barely looked up from his television as I walked past rows of metal doors toward Unit 214. My heartbeat grew louder with every step. When I finally reached the unit, I stopped breathing for a second. The lock had fresh scratches around it. Somebody else had already tried to get inside. My hands shook as I slid the key into place and opened the door slowly. The small storage unit was packed wall to wall with banker boxes, hard drives, file folders, and labeled evidence containers. Victoria had organized everything carefully. Dates. Names. Account numbers. Confidential transfer records from Sterling Biotech. My eyes immediately landed on one yellow folder sitting alone on top of a folding table in the center of the room. Blackwater. I opened it carefully and felt my stomach drop almost instantly. Inside were printed emails between board members discussing hidden offshore accounts connected to millions of dollars in missing company funds. Richard Hale's name appeared repeatedly. So did Evelyn Sterling's. But one document near the bottom froze me completely. It was a private insurance report dated 6 months earlier with my own name typed across the top. Adrian Cole. Subject: background review. My chest tightened as I kept reading. Victoria had hired investigators to look into me before we even got married. I flipped through the pages in disbelief until a handwritten note slipped out and landed on the floor. I recognized Victoria's handwriting immediately. Adrian, if you are reading this, then I failed to protect you from the truth. Tears blurred my vision as I unfolded the rest of the letter. She explained everything in painfully careful words. Years ago, before we met, Sterling Biotech had been linked to a clinical scandal involving a small hospital in Ohio. My father had worked there shortly before his death. Victoria originally approached me because she believed my family unknowingly connected to evidence that could expose people inside her company. Our first meeting had not been random after all. She had been sent to watch me. But somewhere along the way, she genuinely fell in love with me and spent years trying to protect me from the corruption surrounding her family. At the very bottom of the letter, one final sentence nearly broke me completely. I wanted to tell you the truth every single day, but I was afraid the truth would destroy the only good thing in my life. I stood there alone inside that cold storage unit with rain echoing faintly outside while everything I believed about my marriage rearranged itself inside my head. Victoria had lied to me. She had used me at first. But she had also sacrificed everything trying to protect me in the end. Then my phone suddenly buzzed again. Another unknown number. I answered slowly. A calm male voice spoke immediately. Mr. Cole, this is Special Agent Daniel Mercer with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to talk about your wife. My entire body went still. How did you get this number? Victoria gave it to us before she died, he answered quietly. And if you are standing inside Storage Unit 214 right now, then you are officially part of an active federal investigation. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story.